Employers that do a background check on Facebook. What's the most disturbing thing you've seen? Story 1. I'm not a manager, but most of my team participates in interviewing potential teammates. I was preparing for an interview, and I routinely Google their names to see what comes up. In the past, I've been pleasantly surprised to find industry-related accolades that the applicant was too humble to list on their resume. But this time, I came up with a long string of blog posts. I got sucked into the rabbit hole at that point, and the next 2 hours were spent reading all of these blog entries about his wife who was involved in widespread internet trolling and bullying. There were websites dedicated to how horrible this woman was. People invested in domain names related to the message and paid for hosting just to call her out. So I was left with quite the dilemma. As a result of her bullying, her victims and opponents had dedicated quite a bit of time to doxing her, and as a result, her husband and his employer. I figured I would hold on to this information and only inform my boss if we all felt he was a solid candidate that we would hire. The guy came in for the interview, and while I was asking him questions, the whole time I was thinking about his insane wife, but not saying a word. He somehow worked into the conversation that he had recently divorced, which at the moment further complicated the issue in my mind. When we met as a team after the interviews to discuss how he performed, my boss said he wasn't impressed with his responses to the technical questions and didn't seem like a good fit for the team, which was a huge relief for me. I'm not certain what the right call would have been had he been a good fit. I would be wrong to judge him based on his ex-wife's actions. But if there's an army of people on the internet targeting her husband's employer in efforts to get him fired, that can be a headache to deal with. If I saw that, my first thought would be that she's the victim of trolling. Decent, normal people don't make websites dedicated to how horrible someone is. Therefore, the websites weren't made by decent, normal people. That one is kind of tricky, even more so that he was divorced. I would say if he was a good candidate, then he's kind of separated from the situation. It just depends on what kind of relationship he has with this woman. I don't think there is any real way now to connect him to the company, no matter what actions this woman has done. What do you think? Story 2. I was doing background checks for the British Airport Authority during a massive hiring drive in 2007. After there was an attempt to drive a car full of gas containers into the terminal of Glasgow Airport by 2 Islamist wankers. Due to the need to hire several thousand staff in a few months, the normal requirements relating to job stability, etc. were relaxed. So people who hadn't worked in 10 to 20 years were getting interviewed, which led to a few interesting ones. The only ones which I can remember in detail was a guy from Belfast. He hadn't worked since 1990, but they were willing to give him a chance. When we checked his history, he had spent 5 years in HMP, the Maze, due to being convicted of terrorist offenses, before being released as part of the Good Friday Agreement. It turns out that the guy spent his life applying to jobs with long recruitment processes that he couldn't get due to his terrorism conviction, as that meant he was seen as an active job seeker and wouldn't lose his benefits. Remember Trainspotting when Renton tells the interviewer that he's an H addict? Similar to that. Strangely enough, he wasn't invited for an interview. Too long didn't read? A convicted terrorist applying for a job designed to catch terrorists. Related reminder that this was the terrorist attack where John Smeaton tore a tendon in his foot when he kicked one of the terrorists in the testes. This one is just a little hard for me to get a foothold on. I'm not sure about the whole incident that happened there. And also, all the laws right here, just reading it, are just a little too hard to get a hold of at just first reading. But do you think they had the right to just say no to this person? What do you think? Story 3. Oh boy. I once interviewed a guy for an entry-level manufacturing position. He was in his mid-30s, I guess, and he seemed all right, if not a little socially awkward, and mentioned he wanted the job because he had a baby on the way and wanted something solid as he was picking up odd jobs with a relative's company. This job required basically no skill, so we hired nearly everyone we interviewed. After he left, I went back to my desk and looked him up on Facebook. He was obsessed with Rihanna, photoshopped himself into pictures with her, had her as his cover photo, and had a lot of softcore corn with her head photoshopped onto the models. Nearly every one of his status updates were about her. It was freaking weird as heck. The kicker, though, was that his profile picture was him with a Photoshop picture of a pregnant Rihanna with his hand on her belly. He did not get a call back. Ugh. Photoshop picture of a pregnant Rihanna with his hand on her belly? I'm thinking he might not actually have had a baby on the way. Ugh. How do you feel about something like this? It sounds like this person was suitable for the job, but was this person getting rejected solely because they think he would be spouting non-stop defense and facts and love about Rihanna 24/7? Is there no such thing as a separation between work and home life? Story 4. I get assigned interns to work with me based on a term or year from the university nearby. I make it a habit to do it quickly. Facebook search so I'll recognize their faces from the dozen other interns when they come in. Lots of party pics, smoking weed pics, legal here, so in the same realm as those party pics, and women in almost no clothing. Also, a lot of mirror ab shots, though my field is largely female-dominated. And all I look for is the profile picture. I don't do any digging. All the interns I've actually seen get hired have had very normal profile pictures. You know, smiling with friends on a hike, etc. Not because of their pics, but because they're the type of people who understand professional versus private life and what is appropriate for public viewing. This is important. A lot of idiots get pent up about not being allowed to post anything or say anything. You can be into BDSM or beating people as long as you don't display that to the community or location you work for. Story 5. It's not disturbing, but a good story. Before my company had HR, I did the interviews with a couple other people. I interviewed this girl who seemed like a good fit. After the interview, I looked her up on Facebook. She had just posted, "I just had a job interview and I think it went well. The pay is trash though." The pay wasn't trash, considering she had no experience. So my first thought was obvious. I'm not going to hire her. Later that evening, I was in Target and I happened to see her there. She didn't see me. She had this big smile on her face and an awesome aura of someone who is very positive. The next day, I hired her. 5 years later, she worked her way up pretty high. She has an awesome career in digital marketing now. She has no idea. The pay being fair doesn't preclude it also being trash. Story 6. I interviewed a guy in his late 50s. Hadn't worked for years as he had been a single parent to 4 kids. He passed the interview, support position working with elderly people. We then went on to discuss a DBS check, which is where you check any criminal record. He said it would be fine as he didn't have a record. He then asked me about how long records stay on the system for. I said, "What? What am I looking for?" "Forever." "Oh," he said. "Well, I do have something to admit to. My wife said I shouldn't say anything, but I guess I'll have to. When my first wife left, I couldn't work because of the kids, so I got involved in porn films. I'm not sure how, but it led to films involving kids and was sent to prison. Child abuse images. I hate when people say child porn. The room went silent. I honestly don't know what to say. I was just aware I was in a room alone in an empty office with this disgusting, vile man. He must have known and said I will take it. I haven't got the job. I said no, sorry, and he left. I wish I had said more, but I was so shocked and a bit scared. That's icky. I thought it was going to be something where he said he was involved as an actor, but no, it's much, much, much worse. Not going to say anything more about it. It's awful. Let's move on. Story 7. I wouldn't necessarily call it disturbing, but it was the deciding factor in not hiring somebody. We interviewed a guy for an entry-level position. This interview went well, and the other 2 people on the hiring committee were enthusiastic about him. But something about him bothered me. I don't normally check applicants out on Facebook, but I decided to in this case. His most recent post was something to the tune of, "Just got fired again. This is so much hogwash." Someone asked him in the comments what happened, and his response was, "It was my 3rd no-call, no-show. I was too hungover to bother. Those buttholes had it coming for scheduling me right after a holiday." Entitled, irresponsible, and daft enough to broadcast it in a public post? Sign me up. I've had applicants say this type of stuff to my face in an interview. Story 8. Not an employer and not about me. My mother does this about some of her customers on Amazon and eBay. She's a third-party seller on both sides, over Facebook. She once got an order and looked on the person's Facebook. The person was bragging repeatedly there about how she'd scammed multiple Amazon sellers out of inventory and got her money back. She canceled the order for the textbook via Amazon. The customer asked her why she canceled it. Mom reported that customer and pointed out to the customer she shouldn't have her Facebook set on public mode if she wants to scam sellers. I heard that customer was banned from Amazon soon after that. Your mother's a smart woman for doing that. Story 9. I check Facebook for all my hires. I love the ones who have their page public so I get to see all their crazy. Seriously, why try to get a job when you've worked at 10+ jobs in the past year and laugh when you get fired for not doing your job? Or when you post photos of doing stupid stuff at work, or talking about your substance use and partying every night, or baby daddy drama, or like when you keep getting locked up in a country over and over, or when you leave a ton of negative reviews for other small businesses acting like servers are your servants when you're applying for a server position, or baby mama drama, or these are just the ones I remember off the top of my head, and all these are actual things seen. For your information, be smart, people. Hide that stuff. Hire the ones treating servers like hell. Let them get a taste. Personally, I think you should just have 2 profiles. One that you show to the public and one that's just shown to friends. I know that they have these sort of controls in place on Facebook where you can see who sees it, but really it's just better to have 2 profiles. I don't know. What's your policy? Story 10. I recently took a promotion and am working on my replacement in my prior role. The job requires you to be extremely reliable and able to work with generally no supervision. We're taking our time and doing several levels of interviews as well as informal meetings such as dinners or lunches. Those tend to catch people off guard and I get free food. 2 weeks ago, I was poking around a lady's Facebook page and most of it was pretty normal until I found her comment on an article about a cop shooting a dog. She referenced the owners of the dog as monkeys. The people are African American and sided with the cop on shooting the chained-up dog. Her profile was extremely professional except for the article comments. The monkey comment was just the tip. This woman is a full-bore racist. Story 11. Used to be a staffing consultant and had to background check everyone. Had somebody have first-degree unaliving pop up. That was pretty weird considering we do the backgrounds while they're in the office. Had another guy have B&E pop and he wanted to explain. He and some friends broke into a co-op and put all the food against the door so the owner couldn't get in. It was meant to be a prank and now it's on his record. My supervisor wouldn't let me hire him, which I thought was lame. Don't do dumb things as adults, kids. A lot of states have expungement laws for scenarios like this. I volunteered at a clinic once to help people clean up their records so they could get better jobs. Story 12. The place at which I'm a board member fired someone this week for social media, posting pictures of vulnerable individuals and making fun of people with Down syndrome on a personal Facebook. A family member notified staff about the posting. The staff member thought it was outrageous to be fired from the camp for special needs kids for the post. Making fun of people with Down syndrome on a personal Facebook. Wow. Fired from the camp for special needs kids. Oh, the deity. And here I thought it couldn't get any worse. Wait, you're working at a camp for special needs kids, but you're making fun of them on your Facebook? No. Why can I not make comments about these normally? I can't joke about this. And you shouldn't. No, what is it? Are you gonna make fun of a hungry person that comes in because you work at a grocery store? Is that how this works? Story 13. This was actually on MySpace back in the day. I was hiring for a position that involved review of patient medical records in a hospital setting, and as you can imagine, involved a great deal of confidentiality and discretion by the person hired for the position. One of the applicants worked at a bank, but had some prior experience in the medical field, so I was considering her for the position. I checked out her MySpace page and found tons of pictures of her in the bank vault in her undies, posing suggestively with large amounts of money. The content of the pictures themselves didn't bother me so much as her complete lack of discretion and stupidity in posting those pictures publicly where any of her employers might have found them. I was disgusted thinking about what she may have done with other private health information if we had hired her. Poses suggestively with medical records. Story 14. I'm a recruiter, and when I'm screening someone over the phone, I'll use their cell number to pull up their Facebook profile. Yep, most of you have your phone number publicly associated or linked to your account. Because personality fit is so important with most of the hiring managers, I will see if you like to cause trouble or might not pass a substance test because you like to post pictures of yourself smoking blunts. Most of the time I ask, why did you leave your last job? And often they'll say something like, layoff. And around that time on their Facebook timeline, there'll be some post about how their manager is a shrew and they walked out Jerry Maguire style. Lesson here is, unlink your phone number from your Facebook page. Story 15. A guy who said he had an assault charge 15 years ago. He wasn't lying, but that was the start of 27 pages of criminal history that included 2 years of incarceration, during which time his app said he was self-employed as a carpenter. The history was predominantly assaults, thefts, and possessions of illegal substances. I had never before seen 27 pages of criminal history on one person. I will add this, though. He actually did turn his life around. He ended up working at the gym I went to and then got an additional job as a seafood distributor. I never would have guessed that he was the guy that would turn it all around, but he did. Story 16. Sort of on topic. Had an intern that was working with our social media marketing group. She put in a really hateful ticket about how she needed Facebook open on the web gateway filter for her job. So one of the guys on our team looked her up on social media, just kind of interested. Here was a big long post about how incompetent IT was at my company and how she had to get on her personal cell phone to browse. We all thought her boss should see her post. She was gone the next day. Seriously. You talk trash behind the boss's back to friends and family, not in a place bosses will find out. Story 17. This is why I have 2 Facebook profiles. One is very private, search turned off, and posts and friends list are set to private. Profile picture doesn't show my face. Then I have another Facebook that is very open with pictures of me doing outdoor activities, helping at an animal shelter, posting very positive messages, and members of local groups that look good or show interest in my field of work. Ignore people saying you're crazy. I know a lot of people who do this. People see a private Facebook and assume you have something to hide, not that you just enjoy your privacy. I'll definitely be doing this myself eventually. Story 18. He was hired before I started, much before, but I'd been doing an audit of our files and I noticed his background check had a conviction for child violation or something like that in the 80s. This was a man my boss regularly had to play Santa at Christmas parties, where children would sit on his lap. This was the moment I realized the president of the company was a total idiot. But that guy got fired for insubordination like a year ago. There's that. Hell, background checks for anyone that works with children. Story 19. Not disturbing. The opposite. We interviewed a kid who was a total bag of nerves but seemed good otherwise. Just bad at interviews. When we looked him up, his Facebook said something like, "Crashed and burned in an interview today, really down. I would have loved to get that job." We had a big discussion about whether it was genuine, but I figured if he was playing us, it was worthy of a reward anyway. He worked out great. That's awesome. I'm glad he worked out. Story 20. I work for a background screening company. We do not do social media checks, though we are incredibly thorough because it can lead to a world of problems. For instance, if you find out that the applicant is gay and deny him the job because he has a criminal record or something, not because he's a homosexual, he can claim discrimination and sue. Consumers have to be provided a copy of their background check after the research is done, so they will see that a social media search was conducted. Hope this makes sense. Story 21. Not an employer, but have had this backfire on me. Have a fairly uncommon name, but by chance, there's a person who is the same age as me and went to the same school. The person has no photos on his page on his profile, but a bunch of pictures of weed, bongs, FTP statuses. The last 2 jobs I applied for, it was very difficult to say it wasn't me. The worst part was trying to explain that I didn't have a Facebook, which when you say is for privacy reasons, people think you're some kind of crazy conspiracy theorist. Story 22. Not so much Facebook, but I will Google people. I Googled an applicant we interviewed and seemed to like. Unfortunately, their top results were losing their nurse credentials for writing fake prescriptions for controlled substances a few years back, and a recent police arrest for driving under the influence and having prescription drugs without a prescription. It actually made me sad, as they seem likable but off. Unfortunately, not in a place to risk trusting someone with such a poor history of judgment and addiction issues. Story 23. I'm not an employer, but a few years after I resigned from a job that I'd worked at for years, I found I needed to contact my old GM. I called where I used to work and discovered he had quit, so I decided to look him up online. That's when I discovered that the guy I was working for prior to him becoming my GM had 2 Walter White convictions under his belt. I can't judge, though. He was one of the most awesome people I've ever worked for. I just thought it was funny. Confusing wording. Story 24. Pictures of them smoking weed or being belligerently drunk. Not that I personally care, but you're just asking for trouble, especially if you're going into a public sector job. Think of it as a reference, only you're the one giving the feedback on yourself. I actually had one kid whose profile pic was him naked, cupping his Johnson with the caption, "Dongs out for Harambe." Did I mention he had applied to our marketing and social media internship? Hire this man. Story 25. Who does not lock down their Facebook account? The public can see my banner, which is just a nature photo I took, an image, and not a damn thing else. I assume they already know what I look like, so that's not a big deal to me. But unless they had some superpowers that I don't know about, they couldn't see anything else. The public. Story 26. I was trying to hire a nanny. This girl sent me her application. Everything looks really good, so I put her phone number into Facebook to see what she's like and add her to mine. Her background photo is a girl, her, on all fours with a bra and panties on and a guy about to do a line off her butt. I was going to send her an email saying, "Due to your Facebook page, I will not be interviewing you." My husband told me not to help out other parents she's trying to get a job from. Story 27. There was a pre-op transgender applicant that had a picture of herself passed out from drinking with one testicle hanging out from her pants. I'm fine with stuff like that, but it'd be more appropriate to set that as a private post. You don't have to be fine with everything trans people do. The picture was trashy. Story 28. I want to know how far these background checks go. Will they try to submit friend requests to view private profiles? Do they have shadowy ways to connect my anonymous online accounts with me? No special tools, just a basic search to view public posts. The amount of people whose entire social media profiles are public would surprise you. Twitter profiles are gems, too. Story 29. Went to look up someone that had sent in their resume a year or so ago. We were really short-staffed and started to look back at formerly rejected resumes. When we searched her on Facebook, we found out that the lady had passed away. Perfect candidate for graveyard shift. Story 30. I was the potential candidate in this scenario, and it was my Instagram, but I applied for a job as a receptionist at a real estate office. Before this job, I worked at a gentleman's club, and my Instagram was still public. Their response, and subsequent denial, was liking the one photo of me in my old uniform. I changed my settings after that. Story 31. At the company I work for, each department supports different types of doctors. A guy had been hired to the pediatrics team who had been working for a few months and then was gone. Found out afterwards that he used to be a high school teacher, but was fired and sent to prison for violating a student. Pediatrics team. Story 32. Illegal discharge of a firearm from a moving vehicle causing great bodily harm. Man, why bother trying when we said no felons? My boss interviewed him to maybe find out if it was an accident. Nope. Shot his brother in a heated argument after a drive-by they did together. Said brother is now a quad. It's for a bail bondsman agency, too. Moron. Story 33. She had a few paragraph-long diatribe complaining that she didn't get hired because of her tattoos and piercings and how those shrews were discriminatory. I made sure that I didn't meet her in person before I told her we weren't hiring. Story 34. Not an employer, but when I was working at my last job, my supervisor would always come up to my suggested friends. I'm quiet and reserved, so she was probably curious. Had a goofy, memey PFP and a cover photo of Louis Theroux at the time. Don't think it would have been too disturbing. Story 35. We had a 40-something lady apply, and whilst doing usual checks, we went to her Facebook to find her profile pic is of her, her husband, and her daughter at a swingers party, all completely nude, and her with a different man behind her. We were dumbstruck. Story 36. Not an employer, but handles work comp claims. Just had a guy claiming complete incapacity while going on 4 trips to Asia and back, as well as hyping his business all on his Facebook page. Just sent a subpoena for his business record, so it should be fun. Story 37. One guy's profile picture was him with a Friar Tuck haircut doing Edward 40 hands. He had a great interview, but he had to know we were going to check social media. I Googled a gal who gave us her resume, and she had unalived her mother when she was young. Story 38. Out of pure curiosity, as someone who hasn't had a Facebook account in over 8.5 years, that's a good thing, right? Or do employers actually get suspicious of individuals like me? Not job searching, just curious. Story 39. Went through to check a guy that had applied. Has a generally locked down page, but all of the public stuff he'd shared was extremely anti-government. Tinfoil hat hogwash. We hold several local and state government contracts, so that stuff is a no-go. Story 40. Called a young lady in for an interview and kind of liked her, but she acted a little odd. Checked her Facebook, and it was like reading the subforum trees. It dawned on me that she had been high during the interview. Nope. Story 41. This is why I pretty much only talk about hockey, cooking, and my yard on Facebook. I guess I won't get hired by someone who has allergies or hates the Blackhawks, but otherwise I should be okay. Story 42. Red pill and racist pages they've liked or commented on. Some guy had an incredible resume and interviewed really well. Then we saw his comment on Mexicans and Sandy Hook. Yikes. We passed. Story 43. I don't know. Employers? Check my Insta instead of my Facebook if you're thinking of hiring me. I got nothing on Facebook, but I got some cool photos of waterfalls on my Insta. Story 44. This thread made me realize that my Facebook is pretty clean, but my Twitter would probably destroy any employment opportunities. Oh well. Story 45. Guns, substances, and stacks of money. The stacks were so small and such small bills that his entrepreneurship seemed limited. Story 46. I had a reference once tell me that they let the guy go for stalking his ex-wife from the company phones. That was his reference.
Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.